So it's the 2 o'clock. Should we wait for one another minute and then we kickstart the meeting?
Great. Yes. Thank you.
So Abdul, do you confirm that you will record the meeting?
Yes, I already start recording. So okay. Anytime you start, I think if you wait 1 or 2 minutes maximum, we will have everybody connected. Or
So I think we can start probably now. So thank you very much for joining this very special session for Housing Europe members and partners about an important series of calls for proposal under the Life Plus program. And so we're happy to have two persons from the executive agency managing the program. So Adrien Bullier, the senior project advisor, and his colleague Nina Klemova. Both of them will present a series of calls that we are looking at the moment, and that will be very relevant for the Housing Europe members and the social housing sector in general. So after an introduction by Adrien, there will be the presentation of the different aspects, different sections of the calls, and my colleague João Gonçalves will then take over in terms of moderating, and at the end we will wrap up, and of course each time there will be a moment for you to ask questions to Adrien and Nina. So thank you very much, Adrien and Nina, for joining. I think now I give the floor to you. So Adrien, happy to see you. We know indeed each other for a long time. Adrien is a very knowledgeable on the housing sector. So it's also a very good opportunity to discuss about the live calls. So Adrien, hello, and over to you.
Hi, thank you, Julien. Indeed, it's also a pleasure for me to be working together a bit with Housing Europe. It has been a long time, so yeah, I used to work in the social housing sector 1 or 2 lives ago, and so I'm happy to be helping here. So very quickly, maybe I'll share my screen, and we prepared a presentation for today, which is basically, so I'll do a first introduction to the call, after which Nina will actually, we've swapped this around, she'll present on vulnerable districts, and then I'll do the other topics. So just to give you a brief introduction on what the call for proposals is, we go back to the Intelligent Energy Europe program until 2013, after which we were continued under the Horizon 2020 energy efficiency, and now under the Clean Energy Transition sub-program in the LIFE program. What do we do with all these streams of funding is market uptake of energy efficiency and small-scale renewable energy technologies, and that take place across all sectors, but with a very strong focus on buildings. As you know, this is where there's a lot of needs in terms of investments, and the potential for energy savings is very strong there. LIFE is a program that has a long history working on nature and biodiversity, circular economy, quality of life, climate mitigation and adaptation, and we're adding now the 4th brick in this beautiful picture, which is a clean energy transition. What do we do with this clean energy transition sub-program is basically everything that doesn't deal with the technology development. So we try to work on changing the market, and so basically removing any type of market barriers, mobilizing investments, building capacity. We've had long experience with, for example, the Build Up Skills initiative for construction workers, raising awareness in general, education, empowerment. We have a lot of projects that deal with, for example, city planning and this kind of things. Interestingly, I started in this program when I was coordinating a project dealing with energy strategic asset management for social housing operators. So not very far from what we're still dealing with today. So live clean energy transition is new in terms of being a program. As I said, in terms of contents, it's basically builds on what we had before under Horizon 2020, which you may be familiar with. And we've had in the past a lot of social housing operators taking part in our projects and applying, and also being successful in applying. What is new is a number of administrative details. Under LIFE, you will find that we are funding what we call coordination and support actions. These are types of action that are a bit specific in LIFE compared to what LIFE would traditionally fund. Basically, the focus is on EU-wide best practices on energy efficiency and renewable energy sources. And we have very specific requirements in the call for proposals, which is quite different than the philosophy of the other sub-programs in LIFE. So you'll see that the topic text can be very long and very detailed. We do not fund equipment costs. So that's always been the case, and it's a really important feature to understand if this is new to you. So what we find mostly is staff costs. Can be a bit of travel, though in the past 2 years we've saved a lot of money on this. And it can be also consultancy, outsourcing specific research that you might need. But basically, we don't fund investments. We're really trying to build the capacity of stakeholders and change the market. Most topics require at least 3 participants from 3 eligible countries, although 2 of the topics that I'll present today do not. So you can have 1 applicant, and that's fine. Typical budget range is usually 1 to 2 million euros. That's when you have a project that's working across several countries. For 1 country projects, it might be smaller. The funding rate is 95%. Meaning you just need to bring in 5% co-financing, and you don't need to have a public co-financer for that. What do we fund under this call? We have what we call 5 intervention areas. Altogether, we've got 18 topics open for this call, meaning you have 18 lines of funding that you could apply to. So you need to scroll through the different ones and see which one fits best. We're going to present 4 that we think are the most relevant, but there may be others, and I'm pretty sure that there are others that could be relevant for your members. So don't hesitate to have a look at all at the whole package, because there's a lot of things, and social housing providers tick a lot of boxes, I think, for this whole call. I'm not going to go in details on the 5 intervention areas and the 18 topics. We have prepared, when we issued the call in July, we also published a virtual info day, in the sense that you have on our website detailed presentations per topic. So for each of these 18 topics, you'll find slides. You can even see videos, recordings of what was presented on each of them. There's also a number of tips on how to prepare a proposal and so on that I would really encourage you to have a look at. The other thing that's really important to look at is when you want to apply to a specific topic. There's a page for that topic on the Funding and Tenders portal, and we publish frequently asked questions on this on the portal. So have a look at this, because that will answer also a lot of the frequently asked questions that you may have. Now, if you or one of your members has an idea, basically, what do you do? The deadline for applying is on the 12th of January, meaning it's now that you need to start. And I think this is why there was a really short notice for this meeting, because it's basically 2 months from now. We have your proposal evaluated by 3 external experts. And then based on that, we should be able to notify around May when if your project is selected or not. And so your project should start 8 to 9 months after the submission deadlines, which means sometime in the autumn next year. All of the information is available on online. There's one call document that is a reference also, and here you see you have links in this presentation. Have a look at that, and then if you have more questions, you can ask us. So I think the idea of this session was to basically give a lot of time for question and answers. So I'd be happy to see if you have questions.
All right, thanks very much. I do have a question already, as if there is any email available for the applicants to place questions, and then they can see it in the portal.
There is, and that's, sorry, I'm struggling with my Microsoft Teams so I can see you at the same time. But yes, there is. That's mentioned in the live document. It's live CET inquiries. So you'll find that pretty much if you read the call document and on the Funding and Tenders portal. All right.
We can share afterwards this contact, because it is useful. Okay, so let's go to the specific explanations on each individual call. I would then ask, presentation having made, so we can just start. I would just then ask Nina Klemola to start her presentation on the call named Addressing Building-Related Interventions for Vulnerable Districts. So go ahead.
Okay, let's see. Okay.
I've got it there.
You've
Nina.
got it. Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Yes, I think that's easier. So good afternoon, everyone. I'm Nina Klemola, and indeed, I'm very happy to be able to speak to you this afternoon about this, very briefly about this topic that I think will be of particular interest to this audience, and I'm specifically interested to also receive your questions. And as Adrien mentioned, there are many frequently asked questions already available on the Funding and Tenders portal. But of course, if you have anything new, it would be very useful, possibly for other applicants or potential applicants as well, for us to add to those in the coming weeks. So having said that, in the past years, we have had, of course, under the Intelligent Energy Europe and Horizon 2020 programs, many projects that have supported the alleviation of energy poverty. But these have very much focused on low-cost measures, on soft measures, behavioral changes, and awareness raising, as well as support to policymakers. And having followed these projects, many of which have been, of course, very successful in doing so, it has also become clear in the recent years that we do need building renovation measures urgently in order to really eradicate and tackle energy poverty in Europe, and to do it in a longer term. So the key aim of this topic is therefore really to transform the inefficient housing stock across Europe and in vulnerable districts to reduce the negative effects on the residents and energy poor occupants. And I will, of course, say a little bit more about this in the next slides. Also in the Info Day presentation, I go more into the detail of how this supports the implementation of the different policies. As you know, this is a very topical issue at the moment at both the European and national levels, and there are many documents, many EU initiatives that are coming out, and this is of course supporting the implementation of all of those. And I would very much recommend that if you are looking to submit a proposal under this topic, is that you familiarize yourself not only with of course the renovation wave and the clean energy for all Europeans package, but also the Commission recommendation specifically on energy poverty that was released last October, and that gives you further information on the issues, on what has already been done, and on indicators of energy poverty, which is very important if you plan to tackle these issues. Perhaps next slide, please. So in terms of, as I mentioned, so really the key aim is to facilitate the uptake of these renovation approaches for a larger scale rollout of building related interventions. So what we're looking here is actions that can really be replicated at a larger scale eventually, not solutions that will only be applicable in a small area or small district in one area of one country. And this can be done in 3 different ways. So this is a district approach, it's a neighborhood approach, an area approach, however you wish to call it. One option would be that you, as applicants or in the proposal, that you look at vulnerable districts. So you really look at energy poor geographic district, a clear geographic district in which you will be implementing the action. The second option is that you would be looking at clusters of buildings, of course, still with vulnerable or energy poor residents, but this might not be in a clearly defined geographic district. It might be across different areas of a bigger township or bigger municipality, for instance. And thirdly, the option is to look at groups of buildings that have, again, of course, with energy poor residents and that are tied together by common building management. So these could be buildings that don't have a clear geographic connection between them. They might not be near each other, but they are tied together as a cohesive group through the common building management. In many cases, this might be public housing organizations, social housing organizations, and this, of course, would be particularly interesting perhaps for you. Next slide, please. So in terms of what are the 3 subtopics that this topic has, there are 3, of which one is I would say specifically important for you. The first one is to roll out holistic industrialized deep renovation solutions, which is a very familiar concept, I think, to everyone at this stage. So to use, it could use prefabricated modules, but not necessarily. The idea is really to look at, as an example project, for instance, you could look at the Dutch Energiesprong model as an example, but really only as a very well-known example for these types of initiatives. But the idea here is that you're not looking at a specific housing segment. You're not looking at a staged approach. Necessarily, this is really the industrialized solutions. And of course, this can be relevant for social housing, but it can also be relevant for many other types of housing. It can be private rented accommodation. It can be owner-occupied buildings. So this is more open in that sense. Now, the second subtopic is what I've mentioned here in bold is really to develop and implement roadmaps of energy efficiency measures for social housing specifically. And I think I really want to highlight this today. So this is to develop and implement these types of roadmaps that can be conducted step by step. So really as a staged approach for the social housing organizations, and with the key aim of really addressing the needs of these organizations, the needs of that building stock and of those occupants and the energy poor occupants and residents specifically. And here, of course, you would need to take into account the different shapes and forms that these types of housing takes across Europe, depending on the different areas. What do we mean then by roadmaps? The idea is really to start with measures with the shortest payback period. So the idea is to start with something that will then act as a further incentive to continue with other activities. So you can start by replacing the heating and cooling systems, for instance. I mean, this is not prescribed in the topic. This depends entirely on the measures and the type of action that you will propose. What I would like to mention here is that although we're talking about hard measures, we're talking about deep renovation measures, the low-cost measures can also form a small complementary part of these actions, but I really want to emphasize that these should be complementary and smaller ones. So we're not looking to do a similar type of action as we did in the past under Horizon 2020, for instance. Another key aspect for this is to ensure that the regular involvement and engagement of the residents is foreseen from the beginning of the action and is built into the whole strategy, basically, and that the regular communication with all the relevant stakeholders is built in. So not that there are all these activities and renovation measures that are being done and that then you bring in the residents at the end and inform them that this is now the case. So this is really crucial, and I will come back to that in my next slide as well. What the final point I want to make here is that we know that developing successful and robust roadmaps can be very time consuming, depending a little bit, of course, on the scope of the action you're proposing. But at a very minimum, we would expect that the actions put in place, the framework for the implementation by the end of the action, so by the end of the project, meaning that you can demonstrate that you've secured the sufficient funding needed for the actions and that you have really concrete commitment from all the stakeholders so that the implementation can start towards the end of the action or immediately afterwards. But this is something that you will need to explain and put forward in the proposal, how you plan the timelines and when the actual implementation would begin. And then finally, there's a third subtopic, which is very similar to the one I just described on roadmaps, roadmaps of energy efficiency measures, but without the specific focus on social housing. So this is in the idea is to develop these and implement these roadmaps, but really for different type of housing, could be private rented, owner occupied, multifamily buildings. So this, of course, is a third option with the same conditions and expectations that I mentioned just earlier for the social housing. And what I would mention finally quickly here for this slide is that, of course, even though we're talking about energy efficiency measures, the solutions can, of course, include as complementary the renewable energy solutions. And there's no reason why this shouldn't be the case. It's up to you, depending on what you are putting forward. And next slide, please. Okay. So here, some of these points I already mentioned, but regardless of which of the three subtopics you might look at under this topic, what I want to highlight is, of course, we're talking about residential buildings. We're talking about energy poor consumers, and I mentioned this here because there have been many questions on whether hotels could be involved and so forth. So I really want to highlight that this is a residential building topic and that we are talking about the different types of housing that I've already mentioned earlier, including social housing. A second key point is that regardless of the subtopic is that we're really putting the occupants and the residents in the center. So we want their behavior and buy-in to be built in from day one. Really, this is key to ensure that their post-renovation behavior is adapted accordingly, and that you can really reap the full benefits of the renovation. This has to be thought into the whole approach. As well, what we really would like the actions to consider is how to really lower the cost of the renovations and ensure that the delivery time for the works is as short as possible in order to really reduce or minimize the disruption to the occupants, which in this case with vulnerable consumers, energy poor residents, is particularly important as they won't have the means necessarily to take up other housing for a long period of time at their own cost. And in the same vein, we would expect the actions, specifically we're looking at rental properties, perhaps more in the private rented sector, is to avoid gentrification effects, to really avoid that after the works, there will be displacement of the residents in any way. And maybe a final 2 points is, again, even though it's not mentioned perhaps as clearly in the topic text, is that we are talking about proven measures for deep renovation to be included, whether you're looking at the industrial deep renovation solutions, whether you're looking at the roadmaps. We expect deep renovation measures to be included as the key component in all actions under this topic. And of course, I think multiple benefits. I mentioned it lastly. It's not the least important for sure, but of course, highlighting the multiple benefits for the residents is how you would get the buy-in and the buy-in and the support of the residents. So this is also something that we would expect to be considered in addition to the technical work as an important part. Next slide, please. Thank you. I think here I will not go through all 8 expected impacts. This is in the Info Day presentations, detailed in more at more length. What I want to mention just here is really that these are the impacts for energy poor households and energy poor residents that we're talking about. So we're not talking about citizens overall or households in general. This is really the focus. I think this is something that can get lost sometimes in proposals, and I really want to highlight that you keep in mind this specific target group for this topic. And for the next slide, I think here, yes, again, I mean, I think I've mentioned all these points rather clearly, hopefully, the different focus points for this topic. So really also to ensure that there's a cohesive group of buildings that you are looking at, depending on whether you're looking at a district or a neighborhood or a common building management approach, there still needs to be a cohesiveness in the group of buildings that you're looking at in order to achieve the cost effectiveness and the replicability that we're looking for. And as another point I want to mention, as Adrien already mentioned in his introduction as well, is that costs of the renovation are not eligible in principle. With a few exceptions, some costs could be. There's a frequently asked question that gives more insight into this. So I would recommend that you look at those, but really to keep in mind that the renovation costs themselves are not to be included in the proposal. And I think there's one more slide, Adrien. Yes. So okay, I think here, I mean, I've gathered some of the previous and ongoing initiatives. I'm sure many of you or most of you are very familiar with most of these. There are many more. And what I would suggest, of course, is in addition to these, is to really also have a look at the upcoming Energy Poverty Observatory successor, the Energy Poverty Advisory Hub, which will also have all the best practices and case studies and projects gathered, and will be a good resource to start if you're not already familiar with some of the projects that could be of relevance for your proposal. And I think with that I will finish, but I'm very pleased to have any questions you might have now or later on in the event.
Yes, as we have a couple of questions already. So let's see. Well, let's start with Jose Ospina. Please tell us.
Hello. Thank you for that. Extremely interesting. I just have one question. How do you define deep renovation measures? I can see that there's a study there, which I've not read, but perhaps you could just simply define what you would consider deep renovation measures that should be included in such a proposal.
Yes, indeed, we have not put a specific definition for this. What we are talking about, and perhaps this is something that we can do a frequently asked question for, as it might be of interest to many other applicants, is something that is improving the energy efficiency by at least 60%. So we're talking about at least 2-3 hard measures. It can be a combination of different measures, but we're not talking about just one hard measure that would make it deep renovation. By that, you would not achieve sufficient savings and efficiency. So that would be the short answer, but I think we can indeed do a frequently asked question on that. I think that would be very helpful. So also in the, as you mentioned, I think in the Cordis results pack on deep renovation, there are also more information on deep renovation. So perhaps that would also be a good starting point for you.
Thank you.
All right, we have another question from Julien. Julien, go ahead.
Yes, thank you. And thank you, Nina. Yes, it's a question about the eligibility criteria and generally speaking, all the administrative details, because it's something that our members are usually asking. And one point I think that has been mentioned by Adrien at the beginning is the number of participants and the number of countries that have to be represented. One usual barriers for our members to apply for EU funding is the obligation to have at least 3 countries represented. It's a barrier because actually language is often a barrier, and also because members are also willing to develop strategies at the local level, and it already takes a lot of the resources and energy. So I wanted to know more details about that for that call in particular. I think Adrien mentioned that it will be one participant allowed for this one. Can you confirm a bit, and same for the the same for the co-financing rate and so on?
Yes, so unfortunately for this topic, it is 3 legal entities from 3 different countries. So this is not one of the sort of exception topics that Adrien mentioned earlier. So this is 3 from 3 different countries with the 95 rate of funding. So meaning that you would need to find the 5% of your own funding, co-funding from somewhere.
Maybe if I can jump in on this, Julien. I think the idea of this topic and most of our topics is not to work in depth on one housing provider. It would be rather to have activities where you touch a certain number of housing providers, and basically when you look at the impact indicators, we want to get as many, for example, roadmaps developed or implemented. So a project that says we're going to work with 3 countries and we'll get 3 roadmaps delivered at the end of the project might not be as successful as one that says, we're going to work with all, or with 50 housing operators, or you name it, depending on also what you're going to do and what is realistic. But the idea here is to reach a large number of stakeholders, whereas the 2 topics that I'll present later on project development assistance and integrated home renovation services, indeed, they allow you to develop something really in-depth at the local or regional level. So I think that's, but I'll talk about this later, but it's quite different here. The philosophy is not, we wouldn't want to help just one housing provider, for example.
Okay, thanks for clarifying. Yeah, thank you.
All right, we have another question from Paula Ceremetti. Please go ahead.
Yes, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you very much for this opportunity. for us to see a bit of what's going on this level. I would like to ask Nina, the legal entities that are able to apply as partners, not necessarily as lead, what are they? I mean, were they private, non-for-profit? Are they private for-profit? Are they public authorities? Is there a limit?
For me, I mean, for this topic, thank you for the question. First of all, I think there's no limit. There's no prescription in the topic. It can be indeed local authorities, NGOs, social housing organizations. This is not defined in the topic, and I think Adrien will correct me if I'm wrong, but I think this is the case for most topics as well, unless there's a specific. Yes, exactly.
It's either private or public.
But for example, we're private but for profit.
Yeah, no, that's not.
Would this be limited? Okay, great.
No, that's not.
Thank you very much.
A problem. The only thing is you cannot. You can only charge your staff costs, but not.
Right. I understand. No costs.
What that's.
Okay, thank you very much.
All right. Thanks very much for the questions. Let's proceed to the next presentation. In my lineup, I have the large-scale rollout of industrialized deep renovation solutions. I don't know if that's the one you would like to start.
Yep.
Okay. Go ahead.
Okay, so on this one, I'll go a bit faster because you can find more detailed presentations on the on our website. But basically, what we're looking at here is starting from the fact that we have funded a number of projects in the past that looked at industrialized deep renovation solutions for buildings, and there's a business case for it. They work. The idea of this topic is to have projects that basically facilitate a greater market uptake and rollout of those solutions, which can come in different forms, different providers, different companies, and so on, different concepts, depending what they are. But it's really both accelerating the rollout and also the level of savings that can be developed, that can be delivered through this renovation. One point also of attention here is improving the quality of renovations. I mean, we are still in the infancy of industrialized deep renovation solutions, so attention to improving quality of these, and then also better certainty and the level of energy savings that's developed, and so reducing the performance gap is what we mean here. So what kind of projects would be, could be submitted and potentially funded under this topic? Is anything that aims to tackle market barriers, as I said, increase the volume and depth of energy renovations, reducing investment costs as basically a co-benefit of that, reducing the time of renovation on site, and I think for social housing providers this is a very relevant one, reducing the inconvenience. But also basically looking at the whole renovation process and the value chain and making it more attractive, more attractive and more profitable for all those involved, including both the residents, but also the companies that are delivering it and the housing providers. So as I said, build on what has been developed previously. So standardized prefabrication, offsite construction is really one of the keys here, including building information modeling, and basically the idea of plug and play building systems. Also important for us is because, as we said, we don't want to develop. So we don't want you to develop technical innovation. We want you to take it and use it. And is a bit as Nina was saying, use proven measures. But also, the development in terms of business models, performance guarantees, And I think what is very relevant for social housing providers is the design process and the procurement process. That's really important, because in many cases, this is where the housing providers will find themselves. Here you can address different types of buildings, and that is really up to your members if they want to do multi-family buildings or detached housing or mixed buildings. That's also okay. In terms of what we expect, what are the impacts expected? Well, we'd like to reduce the cost, reduce the time that's needed, and demonstrate that these solutions are effective and they are replicable at a larger scale. And then obviously we'll look at the level of energy savings and investments that are delivered through the proposals. One last point, we haven't listed all the projects that you can look at because there's a lot of them. I would really direct you to the two publications that Nina was showing also just before. One is on high energy performing buildings, and the other one is on deep renovation. And here you'll find a whole section that's dedicated to industrialized solutions. So why are we presenting this here? I think it's very obvious, and some projects were mentioned earlier around Energiesprong, for example. Social housing providers usually have a large housing stock, and they can roll out these solutions on a large number of buildings. So this is where I think they can make sense. Yeah, I'll stop here on this one. Just wondering if you have questions. Yeah, Paola, you still have your hand raised.
Any questions regarding large scale or not of industrialized deep renovation solutions? All right, we will have the opportunity at the end of these sessions to go for another round of questions anyway.
Yeah.
So I guess you can pass to the next call.
Yeah. So this one, integrated home renovation services, has been open for several years in the past under Horizon 2020. And it basically tries to answer, why do people not renovate their homes? So here, I think what is really important to understand is we're looking at owner-occupied buildings, which tends to disqualify a number of Housing Europe members. But at the same time, there's a number of countries where you have owner-occupied social housing or public housing. And so this is where I think it would make sense. The starting point is the fact that homeowners usually don't renovate their home because it's just too complicated. Finance is one point among this, but basically they don't know how to do it. They have no time to do it, or they tried and they were discouraged. And it's just a capacity issue. And so, of course, it is complex when you're renovating one house. When you're renovating a multi-family building, it's even worse. And including then energy poverty and linking to what Nina was presenting earlier doesn't make things easier. So the idea of this topic is to work, and here this could be one country applications. Usually we have city level or regional level, or the right scope. And here we're looking for projects that will basically develop services that take on and that deliver all the services that will help homeowners renovate their home. So when we say integrated, we mean that we want projects that cover the whole customer journey, from the initial idea to the delivery and the commissioning of the works. And so the homeowner doesn't have to talk to 10 different people, but can talk to one throughout the process that will basically then be the interface with all the trades that the homeowner needs to deal with. Home, I think it's very clear. Renovation, meaning we're not looking for new build here. It's really renovation, and if possible, looking at deep renovation. Services means they have to be customer oriented, but also ultimately we're looking for proposals that would develop basically a business model where ultimately, in the longer term, the homeowner would be ready to pay and it could be self-sustaining. So these projects should basically create or replicate or adapt and improve existing home renovation services. The intention is really reducing complexity, simplifying the decision and connecting. So it's really this idea of connection and integration. And also the link to the different support measures, meaning public grants, is also an important part. And then, yeah, it's building the expertise in the organization and ensuring that that what is delivered to the homeowner is cost effective. One of the key words here is reliability, so ensuring that the works are properly done, so that you have no counterexample on renovation, especially deep renovation. That's what we want to avoid. So consumer protection policies, also avoiding scams for homeowners, can be an important part of that. Should these projects deliver investment? Yes and no, in the sense that these projects should basically start, get towards investment, but there's no minimum requirement for investments, which would be the case in the next topic that I'll present. However, we don't want just a paper blueprint. We want the services to be actually up and running at the end of the project, and that should naturally lead to investments in housing renovation. I would say also that if you're interested, you can Google my name and Christophe Milin and integrated home renovation services, and you should find an article that we recently published, which basically which analyzes different business models that have been developed through projects in the past, and that can help your members if they want to develop a proposal on this topic. So I'll stop here on this topic. I don't know if anyone has questions.
Yeah, raise your hand if you have any question. I guess not. I have a question, is the same question as before. If there is any limit on the beneficiaries of this call, anybody could access?
Anybody, and one country is okay. All
right, really interesting. Well, let's proceed to the next session then.
Okay, the last one is what we've called disruptive project development assistance. The idea is, and I think this one may be very relevant for some of your members, and we've had some of them in the past. What do we mean by project development assistance? It's between, say, your energy renovation roadmap and the implementation is a whole word. And what we're funding is everything that leads from the project idea to the actual signature of investment contracts. And that includes basically developing a business plan if needed, feasibility study, financial engineering, technical specifications, procurement, following, if needed, the works. What is important here, though, is that we require a leverage factor on this, so I'll come back to that later. What are our objectives apart from funding these project development costs? Is also that we'd like projects to develop organizational innovation, and to reduce the transaction costs. What we mean by organizational innovation is non-technical innovation. So it can be business models, it can be processes, it can be improving your procurement procedures or doing things in a new way. We are looking also for proposals that can be replicated afterwards. So if you've got a solution that suits for one housing provider in the whole world, that's probably not going to be the best way to sell it. And also ultimately, these projects are going to bump into legal and administrative barriers and so on, and they should also, by just developing their projects, should help to remove those. An important aspect in terms of organizational innovation is aggregation, meaning that you would do a number of buildings at the same time, for example, if you're social housing, in order to reduce costs. That is very relevant, in particular, when you're looking at energy performance contracting. The Lemon project was mentioned earlier. That's in social housing in Italy. Enershift is also another one that's doing energy performance contracting in social housing in Italy. And there, the idea of aggregating makes sense because you reach a critical size for energy service companies. Obviously, what we're also looking at here is trying to mobilize private finance for the investments in energy efficiency. I'll not go into the details, but that we're missing public funding to get to our needs. I know there's a lot of public funding available these days with the recovery plan and so on. However, this is also one of the options we'd like proposals to look at, is how they can mobilize private finance, and that means in a lot of cases energy performance contracting. Showcase dimension. I did mention that already. We're looking for projects that will develop scalable schemes, and include private finance. We're also looking at innovation and how they mobilize the investment programs. So it can be simple as developing a project development unit, bundling, pooling assets. Can be mixed assets also. I mean, of course, for social housing providers, that would be more complicated, but this is also an option that could be explored. And also what we mean by showcase is in terms of the level of energy savings and decarbonization. So deep renovation, for example, is really something that we're looking for. We're not looking for just changing boilers. We're really looking for comprehensive renovation with high level of energy performance at the end. Whether you save 60% or if you get to a good energy performance level is also one way to look at it. Now, what I was saying earlier, we've got a leverage factor on this topic, which is very specific. That means for every euro of EU funding that you'll get in residential buildings, you need to deliver investments of 10 euros at the end of the project. What I mean by investments, that means you need to have signed a work contract. You don't need to have delivered the whole renovation, because that will not fit in what is usually around 3-year project. But we really want to have proof that these investments will happen. And so this is a very specific requirement. It's basically the same as in Elena, but this is why also we allow one member state applications, and we're really looking at specific in-depth investment. I think I'll stop here for this topic.
Yeah, I have a question regarding this leverage ratio. This basically means that the grant that the beneficiary receives must be multiplied by 10 concerning their investment in residential buildings. Is that it?
Yeah.
All right. Any other question for Adrien? We're actually almost. We have a question here from Paula Ceremetti. Go ahead,
Yes,
Paula.
hi again. For all of these calls, is there a minimum amount of time duration and maximum? Are they 36 months? Are they 24 months? Or is there a flexibility?
There's no maximum duration. Typically, the average is around 3 years, but it depends. Also, some projects are 2 years. I've never seen a project less than that, but they can be a bit longer. It's also a matter of proposing a realistic planning, and of course, if you propose 7 years, we might say, well, this is going to take a bit long. So, but yeah, in average, it's 3 years.
Okay, thank you.
Jose,
hi, Adrien. I wonder if this call would be suitable for community land trust proposals. There has been an official acceptance of the community land trust idea in Ireland at any rate, but obviously these developments would not only be residential, but they would contain other types of development, possibly work-related, possibly environmental. Would this call have that sort of reach to encompass a community land trust proposal?
I'm not very familiar with the concept of land trust, but this really looks at renovations of buildings. It's not new buildings.
So it's limited to renovations of residential buildings.
Yeah, sorry if that wasn't clear, but it's really renovation here.
Okay, that's.
All right, thanks very much for the questions. Thanks very much, Adrien and Nina. It's almost at the top of the hour. Let me just mention again that we have a 12th of January deadline. So you should be quick. There are 4 options that really cater to our needs, the public and social housing. So the first one is to alleviate energy poverty by addressing the energy efficiency of our dwellings. The second one, the rollout of solutions of industrialized solutions in general. Also integrated home renovation services only for owner-occupied buildings. So they should be supporting the renovation of individuals that want to renovate their dwelling. And finally, we have sort of a project for building a scalable model of assistance to project development in energy investments. So quite a diversity of projects that we can build here. As we said previously, we're going to have this session recorded and it will be available so that you can access according to your pace with more information. I don't know if Adrien and Nina would like to add anything to what was said until now.
No.
All right.
No. I mean, I think the only thing I would really emphasize is that there is more information in the frequently asked questions. So, so in terms of what we mean by roadmaps and so forth for the energy poverty topic, please do have a look at those. There's a lot more explanations and clarifications, I think, also for the other topics. Yeah. And of course, thank you very much for the opportunity, and we look very much to receiving interesting proposals from you.
All right, I think we have a final question from Julien.
Yeah, no, it's just a comment. First of all, say thank you to both of you for the very clear explanation of the opportunities, and also a general comment about the fact that life is a bit less renowned as compared to Housing Europe. Compared to Horizon Europe among Housing Europe members. And yet this is a very interesting and important program. Particularly, I like the aspect of meeting policy needs. The fact that it's also about trying to setting up strategies, meaning a cooperation between different stakeholders at the local level. It's very much in the spirit of what we try to do at Housing Europe, particularly with the Affordable Housing Initiative that we try to steer, and so we hope that the LIFE program and the current calls will further help in that matter. So thanks a lot again.
Yeah. And on that, Julien, that we also, I didn't present that, but we have, for example, topics dealing with governance, where clearly social housing providers could be either the focus or one of the participants, or basically just taking part at local level. So indeed, this is very much in what we're looking at.
All right, thanks very much for your time, and I see you in the next session.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.